just wanna talk about some books. Hey, I just wanna talk about some books. Talk about some books. Talk about some books. Hey, I just wanna talk about some books with you.
Hey everybody, I'm Jo,
And I'm JoJo, and this is Canonical Nonsense.
and we are just two average Joes reading books.
This season, we are exploring the dragon canon and the portrayal of dragons in modern fantasy. So, what book are we talking about today?
Today we are returning to the middle grade as we discuss Hatching Magic by Anne Downer. So, a little background on Anne Downer. Unfortunately, she is deceased, but she was a middle grade author who wrote the Hatching Magic series, which contains a sequel titled The Dragon of Never Was, as well as the Spell Key series. Her books contain influences from Diana Wynne Jones, Ursula K. Le Guin, and Lloyd Alexander.
Hatching Magic is a middle grade book that follows a young girl with a wyvern obsession and a wizard who is chasing his pregnant wyvern through a portal through time.
I read this book when I was a child. I actually ordered it from those little Scholastic book catalogs that you could get in school, and I really loved this book when I was a kid, and we're gonna talk about how it aged for a bit as well. So, a reminder to listeners, this is a spoiler-rich podcast, so if you don't want this book spoiled for you, go read it now. We will be here when you come back, but we are going to talk about whether or not we recommend it, so you might wanna stick around for that first. Would you recommend it, JoJo?
So, this book is, as far as I can tell, mostly out of print.
Yeah.
So if you kind of stumble across it, give it a read. I think the writing is quite good and interesting in it. It's just like nothing really happens in this book. So if you want a book that's all like wallpaper and texture, then this is a good book. That's like a very breezy read. I think I read it in 5 hours in one sitting.
Whoa.
Actually, wait, that might be too long. I may have read it in like 3 or 4. You can really blow through this book. But there's good parts and there's bad parts. I don't think you should try to track down a version of this book after listening to this podcast. If you're curious about what happens in the book, you can listen to the podcast. But if you see it, I don't know, read it.
Yeah, I think that not to compare it overly much to How to Train Your Dragon, but when we read How to Train Your Dragon, we were really excited by how clever it was, how engaging it was, how much it really felt like a book for all audiences. And this book definitely is a book that was written for a 10-year-old audience. So it wasn't written for us. So in some ways, I think that it does feel a little bit less exciting or engaging to an adult. Um, I have to say, like, when I was a child, I really, related to the main character of the book as a child, and I'll get into the reasons for that in a bit. But I think that there are some things in the book that haven't necessarily aged well. I think if you're really trying to find dragon books for your child because they have a dragon obsession and you're trying to find age appropriate books, especially books that have a female protagonist, because I remember when I was that age, and now I think there are a lot more books with female protagonists within the dragon genre. When I was that age, that was really rare. This is one of those books. But there are some things that, I think are a little bit problematic, and we're gonna talk about that now. So do you wanna talk about our trigger warning for the episode?
Sure. There's some elements in this book that could fall into racism or tokenism
Mhm.
about Asian culture specifically. Some of it seems to fall into the stereotype realm. This book has a lot of color in it and tries to include diversity of people in it, and I don't think it always succeeds with an honest portrayal of those people. So trigger warnings for that.
Yeah, tokenism, exoticism, they do use a racial slur for Chinese people twice, which so I think if you do have the like, find this book for your child, that maybe is a conversation you need to have with them about why you shouldn't use that term and why maybe this portrayal of certain Asian cultures, specifically Japanese and Chinese cultures, is a little stereotypical. But we'll get into some examples of where we were like, that seems a little, as we make it through the book. And, we both are white. So we're trying to be as sensitive as possible when we are looking at these, but obviously, some of these things are going to be more frustrating for certain groups.
Obviously, we are not the definitive authority on what is and
Yeah.
is not racist, but we've been in the world 30 years and we know what certain things look like.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so do you want to get into the plot?
Oh my God, I get to start the plot. This has never happened before.
Do you want to?
Yeah, 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 let's go. So the book starts with the dragon, specifically called a wyvern, and her name is Waika.
I think it's I just in my brain said was thinking Wicca, but I don't know.
Of course, it's Wicca. She is searching for a place to lay her egg, and she is wandering around her castle. And she's really upset because she really wanted to lay her egg in this castle that had been abandoned, but the new wife of the castle owner has fixed it up and gone back to religion. So now she has to go find a new place, and she finds a magical hole in space and time to do it.
In a melon patch.
Yeah, she finds a magical hole in space and time in a melon patch and was like, "This is where I'm gonna put my egg." Do you want to describe Wicca?
Sure, I have the quote. When we first meet her, she's sitting along a bunch of gargoyles, and it says, "She fit in well among the ramparts, being about the size of the stone gargoyle waterspouts. She was a small four-legged dragon with a neat, slender head and an eagle's beak." No matter what the old bestiaries and modern dictionaries have to say on the matter, wyverns do have four limbs, as well as hind limbs, and set a powerful membranous flapping wings like those of a bat. Wyverns are the most cat-like of the dragons in their agility, intelligence, and temperament. Vanity, and, like a cat, Wicca had slitted feline eyes, retractable claws, and a deep, melodious purr.
Cat, bird, dragon.
Well, there is that like theory surrounding dragons that and who knows, who knows why every culture has dragons. Some people say it's because there are dinosaur bones all over the world. There's also a theory that, our ape ancestors had three like major predators, and those are cats, birds, and snakes. So dragons are an amalgamation of cats, birds, and snakes. And Wicca really does feel like a grouping of a cat, bird, and snake. Moving on. Gideon, her wizard, realizes that Wicca has gone through this time portal after he's like searching for her for a while. We learn that he's a sorcerer royal and that he has a nemesis named Kobold who wants to extract revenge. It seems like this revenge is like kind of vague. We do learn why he wants to extract revenge later. And we also learn that if Kobold is able to obtain Wicca, it will be bad for Gideon because he can then turn her against him. And then her like only goal would be to destroy Gideon. So he is trying to be very careful about keeping Wicca safe, but also soon to be baby dragon because, if Kobold gets a hold of this new wyvern, that will also be bad. So he goes through the bolt hole in time after Wicca. We then meet our main character, whose name is Theodora, and she is currently watching her dad pack for a biology expedition in Laos. And he is a Harvard. I think it's Harvard. They never actually say it's Harvard, but they live in Boston.
It's Harvard.
It's Harvard. I mean, there are other colleges in Boston, but it's Harvard.
A thing about this book is like nobody ever like goes to the store. They get into their like 1960s like shiny red convertible, and then they go down to Main Street where they see a crossing of the crossing guard who's an old friend from Peru or whatever, and then they share the salutation from Peru, and then they like pull into the parking lot, and while they're there they get like the ripe raspberries that are come from a particular farm where we know the farmer and like all of this stuff. Like there's always like it's always the best and the biggest and the brightest, so it makes sense that they're in Harvard.
Yeah. And Theodora really wants to go with her father. He won't let her. The daughter of his boss, who is in her grade, who seems like they have kind of an antagonistic relationship. She wants to go with him, but he won't let her. And she's like, "Well, this other girl in my grade is allowed to go on her father's research trips." And the other girl's father is his boss. And he gets really annoyed with that. We also learn that like this man is going to be responsible for whether or not her father gets tenure, which will determine whether or not they have to move. And I really thought that this was going to be a setup as a parallel between Gideon and Kobold. but it wasn't. So
I don't remember this. I only remember this whole thing as a setup because he, like, needs to find an animal, and if he, like, finds an animal, then he wins tenure as a prize, and she's like, "I can find an animal with you too," and I'm
not how tenure works
yeah,
also.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But, yeah, that's what I thought this was setting up, was that she has to go find an animal and there's a loose wyvern, so
Yeah, so she then goes to Miko, who is her live-in nanny. She has a dead mom. We have another dead mom.
dead mom! Boo, 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 boo,
Dead
boo,
mom alert.
boo.
Wee woo,
Yeah.
wee woo. Yeah,
What if okay, wait, what if I made a sound effect, and I put it in? I might do that in editing.
I think we should. This happens. This is our most common trope, I think.
Do you wanna do a quick, like, if I was going to insert a dead mom alert sound effect in there, I would can you, like, give me a taste?
Dead mom alert. Wee woo, wee woo.
Thank you. Keep going.
All right. So she has a live-in nanny whose name is Miko. Miko, we are explicitly told, is not Asian. The book is like, this is an Asian name, but she's not Asian, which is our first like, wait, what kind of thing. Her real name is actually Michelle, and we do know that she studied abroad in Japan, but it doesn't really say like, oh, but she was called Miko in Japan, and it was a nickname that she kept when she came home. It just is like kind of an odd. Why not just make her Asian then? Like you could have. And you could have made her an au pair from Japan.
Yeah, the book is weird about Miko.
The book is weird about Miko. Yeah.
Like, once you learn slightly more and more about her life, and it's supposed to make her look really glamorous, and it kinda just makes her sadder.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. That night, her dad says goodbye to her, not Theodora, not Miko. I mean, assume he says goodbye to Miko too, and that he wishes she wasn't so obsessed with Weavern stuff. So we learn that she has this Weavern obsession. Then it seems kind of like there's this like Weavern franchise in this world that's similar to like Pokemon, where there's like a Weavern TV show and Weavern movies and a Weavern card trading game. Different like toys and things that you can get. And she's obsessed with it. And he's like, you need to stop being so obsessed with this. You don't go outside ever. Just like, not really fair, but
She would have gone outside if you took her to Laos.
yeah, it's like she wanted to go to Laos with you and you wouldn't let her. So she asked and you said no.
Like, I don't like, it's brought up kind of randomly after her character's already somewhat established that she's also got this big wyvern obsession. You say weaver and I say wyvern. We're just gonna say it how we say it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Tomato, tomato. And then it's like this weird society thing where, like, if you collect all the cards, you get into a local comic book slash game shop's back room. So it makes it seem super local, even though there's movies and stuff. It's a weird add on.
Well, probably each town has its own chapter or something. I think it's supposed to be like a fake version of the Wizards Guild.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
He leaves, Miko takes her to a duck pond to feed the ducks. And Miko is like really sweet, but she kind of doesn't have much of a personality, but we'll get into that.
Sweet, but no Riz.
Meanwhile, Gideon is transported to a nightclub. So he goes through the portal in time and he's transported to the same when. It's called like where and when. And he's transported to the same when, but he's not in exactly the same where, though he is in Boston as well. And he's transported into a nightclub with his two familiars. He has two familiars who are really not helpful at all, really. So we're not going to talk about them again.
I'm sorry. The Ouroboros is not a snake that eats. So one of his familiars is
Yeah.
called Ouroboros, which is obviously the snake that eats itself, but it's just a two-headed snake in this one that he wears like a bracelet.
And as a belt. So everything in this book has the name you would expect the thing to have. There's a character who's a modern wizard in this whose name is Merlin, and there's a wyvern named Wicca, which maybe isn't like it's just like, yeah, Wicca, this is like entire religion of witches. And we have the snake familiar whose name is Ouroboros, which is a two-headed snake, which is just like, what is a famous snake that existed in some mythology? And then his other familiar is a living flame, which is named, I think, like Flammus or something. Or Ignis, it's Ignis, which is the Latin word for flame. So it's like everything is kind of named exactly what you would expect it to be named in this book, which is fine. It's a children's book. But yeah, Ouroboros, it's like she was like, "What is the most popular snake that existed in mythology?" Ouroboros. He does have, like, future memory, but it's not helpful, so
Yeah, he can sort of remember the future and the past, but he can't remember anything close, so it doesn't really matter.
yeah, it says he's farsighted when it comes to future memory.
I just love the idea that we're making a 10-year-old grasp the cyclical nature of life by, like, giving them this name of this weird two-headed snake.
I kind of feel like the kids who had read this book had, like, that Norse mythology book, on their shelf when they were already interested in that.
The kid that would like this book is a kid that has a reference book on their bookshelf at this exact moment of either, like, dinosaurs or horses or mammals or fake,
Yeah.
dragons.
Which was me when I was a child. So, you guessed it. Okay, Gideon gets pickpocketed at the nightclub, but he is able to retrieve his items. He is then pretty much immediately found by a fellow wizard who is a professor emeritus at Harvard, and his name is Merlin. This is the Merlin character who was able to like sense that he came through, but didn't seem to sense that Wicca came through. And I guess you could explain it away because they talk about how she's like naturally warded against magical spells because of her wyvernness. But it's not really questioned when he meets Merlin. Now, Gideon is what's called, like, time sick because he traveled time when he first meets Merlin, so he's, like, really nauseous, he doesn't feel well. But he's this character's brought in a way where I was like, "Oh, Merlin's gonna be evil," but then he's not evil, so he's fine. He takes him back to his apartment, and then we cut back to Wicca, and Wicca has found a place to make her nest. She makes it on the top of a tower, and she displaces some peregrine falcons from their nest in order to lay her eggs, and her perspective is fantastic. I really enjoyed the sections that she was the point of view character because she has no sense of morality, and when I say that, I don't mean that she's, like, a gray moral character, I mean that she just has, like, no concept of morality at all. She's very, like, an animal in that way. She doesn't really consider the consequences of anything she does, and then she is perplexed when something hurts her or when something doesn't go right. She's like, "Well, why did that happen?" Even if she's the direct cause of it, which is very much like, the way an animal thinks, so she's very funny.
My only thoughts are that she's a jerk and a dummy, and I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah, in the way that, like, a cat is a jerk and a dummy. That night, Theodora looks at her stack of Wyvern cards. We learn that she has all but one. And as she's looking at her cards, Gideon is using his own deck of cards, which seems, I think they're called tarot cards. And he's like using them to kind of divine what's going on. But he doesn't notice that one of his cards is also missing.
As someone who does tarot, like, we're gonna go do tarot actually after this recording. It's not tarot. It's just like kind of a deck of cards, but maybe not.
It is not tarot, but it's described in the way that like they're using them to divine. And like tarot decks,
So yeah, they do call it a tarot deck, but it's not a
I
tarot
just
deck.
watched this YouTube video of this museum was showing their tarot collection of historic tarot cards, and they were talking about the history of the cards, and apparently the tarot deck that we have today, it was not standardized until, like, kind of rather recently in, like, the grand scheme of the history of these cards, and it used to be kind of like a game. So the next day, Miko takes Theodora to the Peabody Museum, which is where Blackbeard's skull is allegedly. Do you know that?
Are you asking me, do I know where Blackbeard's skull is at this exact moment? No, I don't.
It's at the Peabody Museum, allegedly. There is some speculation that it's fake. Anyway, she takes her to the Peabody Museum, and then she takes her to meet her art history professor who lives in Salem. Her art history professor's name is Dr. Naga, and Miko is no longer in school. The book says that like she maybe has multiple degrees, but she didn't ever finish her last degree or something. But she has a really good relationship with her art history professor, and Dr. Naga shows them into her home. She also shows them her artistic practice where she paints miniatures, and Theodora is really impressed and amazed by this art form. And Dr. Naga is really patient with her. She allows her to paint on one of her in progress miniatures. She praises her for attempt and talks to her about how, like, oh, it's in the practice, it's in the materials. You're not supposed to be good at this right away. It's a really kind of wholesome moment. I feel like as a child who was really artistic, that it's really hard when you're a kid to like recognize I don't have to be good at something right away. And even when you're adults, it's hard to like recognize you don't have to be good at something right away when you first start it. And that was a really important scene in that book for me as a kid. They go to an art store afterward because Miko is also an artist. And while they're there, Theodore gets Gideon's card stuck to the bottom of her shoe. We cut back to Gideon and Merlin where they make modern clothes for Gideon using a magazine clipping, which is a really cute like magic. So he like points to the clothes that he wants and they cut them out of the magazine and then Merlin uses a spell to make them actual clothes, but they only last for 24 hours, and then they'll turn back into paper, which is cute. Like, that's a really cute spell. Do you wish there was more of that cute magic stuff in this book? I feel like there wasn't as much of it as I would have liked. They then search for Wicca throughout the day. They're unsuccessful. They try to find spell ingredients so that they can summon her, and they're really having trouble finding the right spell ingredients for different reasons. They eventually find an Eye of Dragon at a Chinese apothecary in Chinatown. And this is like another kind of area where it does just feel a little bit like the stereotyping of an apothecary would sound, like the way that it's portrayed is a little like iffy. Then we cut to Cobalt for the first time. And Cobalt and Febris, who is his demon, appear in the present. They rent a penthouse while they search for Wicca. And Cobalt is really mean and abusive to Febris. Febris is disguised as a woman, but she has cloven hooves still. And he's kind of making her dress a certain way, which includes high heels. And she's like, well, my feet hurt. And he's like, well, this is how women dress. And she's like, well, other women don't dress like this. And he's just kind of controlling and mean to her for the whole book.
She's a dummy. We should say that out right now. I mean, you'll see you later. Big old dummy. And they kind of deserve each other, is what you get.
Well, I think it's supposed to be like in those kinds of, in this kind of media and those kinds of movies where like the two villains are kind of idiots, but they're still video. It's like the sticky bandits in Home Alone.
Very much so.
Yeah. Wicca searches for something to eat. She stumbles into a chocolate factory and gorges herself on chocolate, where she then gets a sugar rush, harasses a bunch of swans, smells like foul magic, which is the magic that Kobold and Febris are giving off, and then returns to her egg. And then she has a sugar crash, and she's like, why am I dying? Because she doesn't recognize that it hurt her.
I want to be fun and youthful and just like the whole chocolate. This like dragon, cat, bird is gonna eat chocolate. It was just like, all right, we get it. This is a book for 10-year-olds. I don't know how you felt about it.
I thought it was cute. I think, like, there was a little bit how you explained, like, this book never just has someone going to the store. That was definitely on display in the scene where she goes into the chocolate factory because every aspect of it is so over-explained to the way that the, like, mechanism of the factory works that would cause her to be stuck in a room with a bunch of chocolate, that I was like, "Okay, we get it, like, she is eating a bunch of chocolate." But I think it's cute. I don't know, I think it's just cute. I really thought it was funny that she had, like, a sugar rush and she used that energy to harass swans, and then she has a sugar crash and she's like, "What is happening to me?" Which, I don't know, I just like that.
Maybe it's because I'm a grumpy 30-year-old. I was like, that's only how 10-year-olds think about sugar and like chocolate. When I eat chocolate now, I have a very different relationship with it.
Yeah, but imagine having chocolate if you've never had chocolate before.
I just feel like if I was a bird cat, I wouldn't like it. As someone who has both birds and cats around them regularly.
Yeah, but she's also a dragon.
I just have to be honest, this is one of the things that annoyed me the most in the book, where I was like, I really shouldn't be that annoyed by this. This is a perfectly normal thing to be in a book.
Meanwhile, Miko helps Theodora clean the card that they found, and they get into this really bad fight because Miko's like, this card is absolutely something of historic value. It should be in a museum. It needs to be appraised. But Theodore's like, "I need this to complete my Wyvern card set," even though she acknowledges, like, "This is not the same quality as the other cards I have." Miko kind of says to her, like, "Well, we'll decide what to do with it tomorrow."
This is such peak Indiana Jones behavior. It
Yeah.
belongs in a museum. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I was thinking that too. Gideon and Merlin cast a retrieval spell, and, this is another example of where it's like, "What's happening?" So that right before they do that, they order Chinese food, and it's delivered to them, and they eat, like, the fortune cookies. Then they have to, like, stuff all these little pieces of paper and all these little tubes to create the summoning spell, and because they accidentally put
Which can I just bump in? Which is cool. Like it's really
Mhm.
cool that this is a really crunchy magic system that has like a bunch of jars and stuff and they have to boil things and it's a process. Like that's really cute and fun.
But they accidentally put one of the fortune cookie fortunes into one of the vials, so instead of summoning Wicca, it summons a Chinese dragon. It just also feels a little weird because we know that fortune cookies were first created in the US, which the diaspora is real, but the theory is that it actually was like fortune cookies were actually invented by Japanese immigrants and not Chinese immigrants. So I don't know, it just like it's like really like that's the reason you like bought an ingredient from a Chinese apothecary. It couldn't have been that other reason. Like it just felt like a really stupid like you already had like a perfectly good reason that would have felt less weird. I don't know, it just felt a little weird. I don't know how you felt about this.
The whole scene felt like a dad joke that didn't land. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, they realize that one of the papers is not in the vials, and Merlin's like, "Oh, it's right there." So Gideon, like, runs and, like, grabs it, puts in the vial, and then that is the one that is the fortune cookie fortune. And this is again where I was like, "Is Merlin evil?" Because he seems, like, grossly incompetent, and he is grossly incompetent through the whole book in this way, which I was like, "Oh, he's actually trying to thwart Gideon." No, he's just grossly incompetent.
This book seems to have a bias where like back when magic was pure in the 1300s, like that's when magic was good. And now the magic we have magic here, but it like kind of sucks. And I thought that
Yeah.
was like a reflection of Merlin where he's like grossly incompetent even though he's like one of the like just make magic is dying and all we have are these rubes to like perform it, but like Gideon is a real wizard because he's from a castle, which is where real wizards come from.
Yeah, but there is a scene that I didn't talk about because it wasn't really necessary, where Kobold turns a lifeguard into a seal as he's leaving the beach, and then there's just a random unnamed wizard on the beach, and she, like, quickly turns the lifeguard back into a person.
She like is part of a whisper network too because she like sends off like a thing.
Yeah, but she has the same owl insignia on her keychain or something that shows that she's part of the same wizard organization as Merlin.
Lol. So Merlin just sucks.
I think Merlin just sucks. So they hide the dragon in the shower because it's a water dragon. Kobold, meanwhile, is searching the bookshops for banned books that will summon the shadow version of Wicca, which will lead him to the real Wicca, so then he can turn Wicca against Gideon. And sure,
I was gonna say the plot around what's going on with Wicca seems to change throughout the book. It's always very nebulous what's going on.
yeah. And Merlin asks Gideon, he's like, "Why does Cobalt hate you?" And Gideon's like, "Well, it was a woman named Gwynlyn who we both were in love with, and we started competing with each other for her, and so she lost interest in both of us because she thought we were stupid.
Which, good for her.
And then Cobalt destroyed her mind with a love spell. This book acknowledges that's not okay to cast a love spell on anyone. Not all books acknowledge that love spells are disgusting and creepy. So good for this book for that. And so her father, the girl's father, who's also a wizard, sends her to a faraway island, but we're not told which faraway island she was sent to recover. And so Kobold has never forgiven him. Kobold also is really jealous that he was able to get the spot as the Wizard Royal where Kobold wasn't. And there is some like vague Kobold is like the minion of an evil person, but we never learn more about that.
So the reason that Cobalt has a demon is because in some way he is bound to a demon, like a sorcerer. He's a sorcerer. He gets his magic from a contract with a demon, and my dog has come upstairs to bother me. Throughout the book, Cobalt can't just go back to the real world without destroying Gideon because it's part of his contract or something. Stakes for Cobalt throughout the book is that if he doesn't get Gideon for whatever monster, demon, whatever that he signed this contract with, then he is going to get killed or whatever. It's unclear. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad for him. He needs Wicca, I think, for the person, but he also wants to he also it seems like the person wants him to destroy Gideon as well.
There's a lot of motivation for him, and
Yeah,
like it doesn't
yeah,
pay off later. I'm
no.
sorry for the rest of the podcast.
They go to a Chinese festival and pose as one of the dragon boat racers so they can get the Chinese dragon into the water because 'cause they're like, "Well, if we can get it into the ocean, it'll swim back to where it belongs." And again, there's some, like, racist stuff here th with what they feed the dragon, where they feed the dragon rice and jasmine tea, and then they feed it popcorn because the popping reminds the dragon of firecrackers here, but that felt like, ugh. And they also this is where they use the racial slur in this scene. But they are able to get rid of the dragon, so they get rid of it.
I mean, the dragon goes home after being summoned. So much has not happened in this book, which is my biggest grief. They've been trying to summon this one dragon. The other people have been trying to find this one dragon. Mika is just hanging out, looking at art, trying to get dragon collectibles, you know? And then Wicca, like, ate a bunch of chocolate.
Well, we are gonna talk more about Wicca because she wakes up and looks for some more chocolate, and she finds it in an ice cream shop and eats an entire batch of ice cream. Kobold and Febris go to a drugstore because Febris is, again, in pain and she needs something for her feet. Again, like, is trying to tell Kobold, like, "Hey, like, I need different shoes," and he is mean to her. He, like, makes her spit out a frog because he doesn't want her to talk back. So, again, just mean guy. Wicca's baby is born, a little baby, and it hatches, and she breastfeeds it milk.
Oh my god. It's is insane. The cat, bird, lizard has teats.
She could have just, like, regurgitated stuff for her like birds do, but she didn't. She breastfeeds her with chocolate-infused milk, so chocolate milk, if you will.
My Joe moment where I tell you an animal fact, even though it's not part of the podcast, is there are some lizards that produce like a milky like lactation substance. It's not actually milk, it's like something else. So you kind of can do it. It's just so weird in this book.
Like,
It's just the weirdest
it even
option.
talks about how it's, like, kind of awkward for her to breastfeed because she has a beak, the little baby. So it's just kinda weird. Miko and Theodora talk to two art appraisers about the card, and Cobalt walks in and he's like, "I'll buy it from you." And he uses their full names, and Miko's like, "No, we're not selling it to you." Cobalt then receives his banned book in the mail and tells Febris that he has a plan to get the card. Theodora has to give it to him of her own free will, so he can't just take it from them. And this is when Gideon realizes that his card is actually missing. So they use a Ouija board to locate it, which is like Merlin's like, "Oh, I have this Ouija board that's a real Ouija board that we can actually use." It's like, why didn't you bring this up the first second that Gideon was there?
Oh, this is what you got stuck on? I thought it was just dumb that it was a Ouija board. I was like, really, a Ouija board?
And Gideon's like, "Well, can we use it to find Wicca?" And he's like, "No, because wyverns are able to shield themselves from magic."
Just to be fair, the reason Gideon has a wyvern and has Wicca in general is to basically eat curses and like spells.
Yeah, she also fights demons too.
Yeah. So her whole thing is dispel magic. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Why didn't you use that to find the spell ingredients instead of going all over town?
Because girls be shopping.
Theodora has a ritual of her own where she lights a fire to summon a wyvern, which is like a really cute, like little kid ritual where she puts on special clothes and she puts on a special like piece of jewelry from her mom and she like burns a bunch of I think it's like rosemary in an ashtray. But Miko gets really mad because of the fire risk, and she takes the card. She's like, "I'm gonna take this." Theodora has, like, a meltdown, and she destroys all the Wyvern stuff in her room, throws everything in her closet. She has, like, this huge paper mache Wyvern that she made, that she crushes. She tears all the posters she has down from the walls and rips them up. And we do learn that, like, Theodora is really upset, not because she got caught. She's afraid Miko is unhappy with her and that Miko will leave.
I really love this scene because it's such a little kid thing to
Yeah.
be obsessed with something and then like something happens and then you're like never again. This I have to kill the part of me that was this. I'm a little bit hard on this book because I really think that it's not really for people over 10, but a thing that I really like about it is that it is for kids who are 10 because Theodora is such a 10-year-old. Kind of selfish, doesn't think about things until she thinks about things, and she's smart and she's precocious and she's capable, but she's like still 10 and she has these like wild emotional swings and she's like trying to do her best, but it's not the but she's still 10, so it's not great. I love this scene and I love Theodora. It's just so cute.
She is a realistic 10-year-old. She's not like the I know that Aragon is 16 in Aragon, but he acts like he's actually, like sometimes he acts like he's 30, where she is, like, a 10-year-old who is a 10-year-old. And it is a little bit refreshing to have a character who actually is the age that they're supposed to be instead of being a little older than the age they're supposed to be.
Or a 30-year-old that acts like a 10-year-old. That's annoying too.
So as she's destroying all this stuff, a UPS person delivers a package, and when Theodora finally goes downstairs, she's like, "Miko's acting really strangely." Miko then makes
Wait, the thing that Mika is doing strangely is that Mika has painted every single toenail a different color and then also has just dripped nail polish everywhere. So there's puddles on the floor. And as someone who has spilled nail polish, I can't think of anything worse. Like it's a horror show. That will never come out of anything, no matter how much like poison and nail polish remover you pour on it. Ugh.
she also, like, steps in it and then is, like, tracking it across the floor, and Theodora's like, "What is going on?" And then she makes this inedible lunch where she, like, puts eggshells into this, like, thing, and she, like, pours dish soap into lemonade.
You know that room had to smell insane.
Yeah, and Theodora's like, "That's not Miko." She's just like, "Whoever this is, it's not Miko." So she hides outside, and what's happening is Febris is possessing Miko, and she's, like, loving this new body. She's like, "I love these toes." She's, like, enjoying eating. And she's kind of getting distracted away from, like, the goal of trying to get Theodora to give her the card because she's so happy to be away from Cobalt, and she's so happy to be in a body that doesn't hurt her. So, while all of this is happening, Wicca takes her baby on the first flight, so her little baby's, like, holding on to her belly, and she's flying, and this is when Theodora's summoning catches her, and it's described that because Theodora's summoning is so amateur and the magic doesn't come from any kind of school or practice or tradition or whatever. It actually does catch Wicca by surprise, so she gets jerked out of her flight and she falls into the yard beside Theodora's house, hurting her legs, and she's not sure where her baby is. Theodora goes outside to think about, like, what to do about Miko and her weirdness, and she finds the baby wyvern in her tree. And she's like, "Oh my god, this is what I've wanted my whole life." But she's feeling really weird about it.
I have to say also, this is like 3/4 of the way through the book. Someone has finally met this dragon, and I was just, this needed to happen so much earlier.
I think it was, like, even further into the book. I think it was, like I feel like we were, like, 20 pages from the end when that happened.
I just want to say the pacing of this book is uh slow and just they just needed to move stuff up or just cut all of the random stuff that didn't need to happen.
And because Gideon and Merlin used the Ouija board to find who had the card, they come up to Theodora's house, but they smell a demon, so they just leave. They're like, "No, there's a demon in there, we gotta leave."
They're also like, we can't sneak in. That would be illegal. We need costumes. We'll
Yeah.
come back later. It's like, dude,
Just knock on the door.
It was so frustrating because I was like, "Finally, something is happening in this book." And they're like, "Oh, it's locked, time to go away." And I'm like, "No, kick down the door!"
Theodora lies to Febris and leaves with the baby with her, and she's like, "Oh, I have to take the cat to the vet." She, like, puts the baby in a cat carrier, and she bikes to the secret clubhouse that she and her friends made on the roof of, luckily, Merlin's apartment building. And she tries to feed it, but it's not willing to eat anything. So then she, like, kind of packs it away in that area, and then she goes to a payphone to call Dr. Naga 'cause she's like, "I don't know who else to call." Gideon then uses the Ouija board to find the baby. He's like, "Could we use it to find the baby?" And Merlin's like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." And they're like, "Oh, it's on floor 8, but this building only has 7 floors." And Merlin's like, "Well, I guess that's wrong because this building only has 7 floors." And Gideon's like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And then Merlin's like, "Well, there's a little building on the roof. I guess we could check that." And it's just like, you are so lazy, Merlin. You talk so
You are
much.
muttering, by the way. You gotta mutter louder.
I just ugh, Merlin was so annoying. He's so lazy and he sucks.
He's just there to kind of tote Gideon along.
Honestly, I feel like Gideon probably would have been fine without him. The amount that Merlin slows Gideon down is insane. So they go to the roof, immediately find the baby. Gideon, like, takes it. They leave a note for Theodora because they know it's her who left it. Gideon's, like, trying to get it to eat, and it won't eat, and he's like, "Oh my god, this thing is gonna die." And he's like, "It was fed something when it was first born, and it doesn't want anything else. It will not eat anything else." So Theodora meets up with Dr. Naga, and then they go up and the baby is gone. So then they go back to her house, and Gideon and Merlin are going back to their house because 'cause they're trying to find they know that Wicca is there, and they're like, "Okay, we need to figure out what Wicca fed her." But when Theodore gets back to her house, her father is there with a broken leg. And he's like, "Oh, I broke my leg on the first day on in the field, and I'm coming back." And she's like, "Oh, like, let me show you the Wyvern card." So she runs to show it to him, and when she hands it to him, Cobalt appears, and her father black smoke expels from his mouth, and we learn that Febris had jumped into him and was possessing him. So Gideon and Merlin get there, they go to the backyard, they search for Wicca, they feed the baby dragon chocolate. This is where the snake actually does come in handy, the Ouroboros. And so she's finally able to eat, but Wicca is missing. And Gideon is like, okay, I'm just gonna fight this demon myself. So they go inside. Cobalt is researching the spell while Febris guards Theodora, her father, Miko, and Dr. Naga. And she, is asking, "Well, who is this woman?" Because she's looking at all the photographs on the mantle, and Theodore's like, "Well, it's my mother." And Febris turns into her mother briefly, and she's like, "Well, I could take her place." And Theodore's like, "You don't take people's places, even if they die, that's not okay."
Fevris is wild in this scene. Just so dumb and like bumbling around. It's great.
Yeah, and, she's kind of hinting, "I would stay with you instead of Kobold, I would rather stay with you," but they don't really pick up on that. Cobalt then tortures Miko's cat, and Theodora jumps to save the cat, but then he traps her in in her last memory of her mother when her mother was dying in the hospital, which is insanely dark. And Febris then tries to stop Cobalt, but Cobalt, I think he hits her or something. He does something to Febris. And then Gideon steps in and he's finally there. And he grabs the card, but then they have this wizard battle where they're both holding onto the card and saying these nonsense words to each other. So we have a wizard fight.
It's fine.
They're both speaking in this version. So there's Wizard Latin, but we also learn there's Wizard English. So I assume that there's Wizard any language, and it's just a different version of whatever language you are using. This scene is in Theodora's perspective. So she's trying to make sense of the words that they're saying. So it's just nonsensical English words strung together that make no sense, which I thought was a kind of cute way of showing that. Also in Theodora's, my dad's generation of wizards were stuffy old men with huge beards in big robes, and that was boring, and my generation of wizard are sexy, guys in very tight clothes with good teeth, and these 2 guys are neither of those, they're just 2 random guys, which I thought was actually a pretty funny way of describing them.
Yeah, the whole scene's a little It's a little stinted where, like, everyone's just kinda hanging out and then both grab onto a card together, and it kind of feels like a Dragon Ball scene where, like, both of them are shooting energy balls out of their hands, but they're equally matched, so it's just like but it's a card.
Yeah, they do interesting things, like, Gideon makes honey pour from Kobold's mouth, so Kobold can no longer cast for a second, and then Kobold I think he opens the floor up below Gideon's, maybe it's the other way around, like, they open the floor up so then he, like, sinks into the floor, and Kobold makes Ouroboros huge so that he cracks Gideon's ribs because he's so heavy. So, like, some interesting things like that happen. Eventually, Gideon has to release the card, so Cobalt is able to cast the spell, the summoning spell, with his full power, summoning the anti-Wicca, the Shadow Wyvern. But Wicca then bursts in and fights it, kills it, then fights Cobalt, and he flees, and eventually tries to fight Febris, but Theodora is like, "No, she's good." And her dad this whole time is like, "Whoa, what's that thing?" And he's super excited by the Wyvern because he's like, "Oh, this is a new scientific discovery."
This is how he gets tenure. He found a dragon. He found his animal that he
Yeah.
needs to trade in for tenure because that's how it works. It's a one-for-one
Yeah,
trade.
that's how tenure works. But Theodore's like, "Oh, they're gonna wipe our memories, so this isn't gonna work out for us." But after Miko and her dad's memories are wiped, Merlin and Gideon do send him the baby dragon's shell and one of her scales, so he is able to write a paper about this and is really confident that he's going to gain tenure from that. Theodora also starts taking art lessons from Dr. Naga, who is also some kind of magic user, but is in a different magical guild from Gideon and Merlin, who are in like a wizard's guild. So they all meet at her house, or on the pretense of this is one of Theodora's art lessons, and they give Theodora a commendation for her assistance in helping the baby, and then she says goodbye to Gideon and Wicca because they're going back into the past. But because the baby dragon was given chocolate from birth, she can no longer live without it. So Merlin is going to take care of her, which I was like, I seriously do not think Merlin could take care of anyone, but okay.
It's so funny because you're like, this Merlin character sucks. I hate him so much. And I was like, fine, he's a little ditzy, but the plot can't move forward because that would end the book too quick. So we got to bop around for a little bit. I don't mind. But the chocolate stuff, just I can't deal with it. It's so annoying. We both have one thing in this book that we're just like, I can never forgive this. And I just find it funny for you. It's this one dude. And for me, it's the concept of a dragon eating chocolate.
Well, at least he's retiring from his emeritus position at Harvard, so it'll open up some funding for another full-time professor, hopefully. Maybe that'll directly help. I know it's a different department, but, like, maybe that will directly help Theodora's father.
At the very least, someone who is not Merlin will have that position.
Anyway, they leave for the past. We learn that Kobold is demoted by his evil overlord, and he decides to stay in the present and move to Hollywood to become a Hollywood executive, which I guess makes sense. We also learn that Febris is able to break away from her abusive relationship with him, and she turns into a swan. She has these, like, cloven hooves for most of it, but when she's a swan, she has web feet. So she's really happy as a swan, and Theodora does visit her and, like, feeds her. And that's how the book ends. So what are your thoughts on the book? There we go.
I mean, I feel like I said them, nothing happens, and then eventually they end the book. Got really frustrated that all of these characters kept like not meeting each other
Yeah.
because you keep getting these point of view and you're like, when are they going to meet up? When are they going to meet up? Literally, like they're ending up in the places where they should be and just like not interacting. And that was like really frustrating. Otherwise, I thought the book was very well written. We don't really talk about it much because we don't have too many quotes directly from the book, but it is a joy to read. The prose is a selling point on this.
Yeah, in the beginning of the book, I said that one of her influences was Diana Wynne Jones, and the way it's written and the way things are described really feels like the way that Diana Wynne Jones describes things in her books.
Thought the dragons were cute. Didn't like the chocolate. The kids were cute. Didn't like the adults that much. Otherwise, it was fine.
Yeah, I agree with you on you said that people were ending up in the same place but still not meeting each other. When we were kind of discussing this before we recorded, you were like, "Well, why didn't they just find Theodora when she was upstairs on the roof with the dragon? That would have been a perfect time for their plot lines to converge." And I totally agreed with that. I think that would have simplified things a lot. It would have made more sense, but that didn't happen.
They find Wicca and she's in a hole, and they're like, "Well, she's too grumpy to get, so we'll just leave this snake here and then we'll come back." And I was like, "This whole book's you trying to get this one dragon." And you're like, she seems busy. So I think we'll just like come back later. I'm like, "What's the point of this book?"
The book, I didn't really remember a lot of it. In my memory, Theodora got the dragon, like, way earlier in the book, but this book was important to me when I was a child, and I think it is because I saw myself in Theodora. She really liked art, she really liked dragons, she had this really active imagination. She had 2 friends, but neither of them were there during the summer, so she was kind of more on her own, and I think, like, those things I really related to as a child, and then the scene where Miko takes her to Dr. Naga, and Dr. Naga is so patient with her and is such a good teacher to her when it comes to the miniatures, and, like, how she felt about that scene after the scene was over and how much it meant to her. That is such a wonderful scene, and, like, how I think I people in my life who were really like that to me when it came to my art when I was a child, and those are really foundational moments. So I can, like, see reading this why I related to it so much when I was a child.
When you suggested we reread a book you loved as a child, in my brain, I went, "Oh, no." Because I, a while ago, rewatched The Brave Little Toaster, and it was the first time I'd rewatched something that I liked as, like, a
Yeah.
child, as an adult, and I was just like, "Oh, no, this does not hold up even a little bit. This is a bad, bad movie."
Someone I work with just told me that too. That it was like a conversation that wasn't even about children and nostalgia, and they started talking about how The Brave Little Toaster was, like, horrifying to watch as an adult.
Yeah, so when you said that, I was like, "Oh, I hope it's more How to Train Your Dragon and less, Brave Little Toaster." But, I mean, this is sort of like the perils of nostalgia. And also
Yeah.
just like you grow as a person, you understand why you like it then, and you understand why you don't like it now because you're different people, and that's beautiful and great.
No, I agree with that, and I think this book was like, it is written for that age group, and that's okay, and it doesn't have to be anything else. And again, my only real issues with the book were these, like, questionable, slightly, like, racist things against Asian people. That is, like, the only, like, real issue I have with this book. Otherwise, Merlin can be a dope, and that's okay. It's annoying to an adult reading that, but, it's not a problem. It's not problematic to the book.
It would be nice if this book wasn't weird about Asian people, but it just kinda is.
Yeah. You did wanna say that thing about Miko and how her character feels really tragic when looking at her from an adult lens?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just Miko clearly was in academia in some way or portion and like has a lot of education and is now a live-in nanny.
Yeah. So rough.
What happened to this? She's like this vibrant, well-dressed, interesting woman who's like
Really put together. No, has all these
it
connections.
is just watching this one kid who's, like, a nice kid, and I think part of it is that the author just wanted to, like, make the world seem very vibrant, so they made Mika very cool, but it just makes it so dark that she's, like, just babysitting.
Most realistic part of this book, unfortunately, for young academics. It does have kind of this dark undertone that it seems like it wasn't intentional from the book at all. I actually thought in the book that Miko was going to be Gwynlyn, and the faraway island that they sent her to was modern day Japan. But then we find out that Gwynlyn actually is like the great grandmother of Theodora, and the faraway island that they sent her to was 1900 Manhattan, which is kind of random.
Yes, it was like, "By the way, we put a bow on this plot thread," and I was like, I didn't think it needed one.
Especially since Miko, like, in the beginning of the book, Theodora reflects, she's like, "I don't actually think I really know that much about Miko's life." And all of the adult characters really feel quite flat, like, I am doing and saying what I need to do and say so that the plot can continue. And with Miko, it does feel a little bit like that, and then when you have that, like, facet from Theodora where she's actually pretty closed off about her past, you're like, "Oh, she's hiding something." but that's not the case.
Can I tell you my interpretation of that scene?
Mhm.
Theodora said, "Wow, I've never thought about Mika's past as a person." And I'm like, "Yup, a 10-year-old kid does not think about other people exist outside of like their privilege to serve her." And she had her first moment of being like, "Oh, maybe I should care about other people in the world." And you're like, "Yeah, buddy, you should care about other people in your life and like ask them questions and get to know them as human beings and not as like relations to you." So that was what I took from that.
Yeah, I mean, this book does have some coming of age elements in it. Like at the end, Theodora isn't as interested in Wyverns as she was in that Wyvern franchise as she was in the beginning of the book, and kind of has this more adult lean to her. So it is kind of like, oh, she's maturing. She's starting to think about people other than herself. She's starting to understand that the world is broader than just this like obsession that she has. But I don't know that the book really handled that well, and maybe the second book kind of really delves more into that, but I don't think we'll be reading that for this podcast. I think we're gonna be moving on. So this has been Hatchy Magic by Anne Downer. What are we reading next?
Okay. Well, if there are any children listening to this podcast, then this next book is not for you.
Not for you, sorry. Go read How to Train Your Dragon instead.
Where everything is sweet and well written and nothing happens. Anyway, so we are going to read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yaros.
It's time, baby.
Yeah. This book has been on our radar since we started the podcast because it's one of the biggest books in the world.
Yeah, I think Rebecca Yaros is now like the richest fantasy author or something.
Yeah, it's done gangbusters. And the genre it's in was already doing very well, and this took it into the stratosphere. I'm sure there's a million other reviews of this book.
We're coming to the party a little late.
No, so we're coming to this party after reading like 14 different dragon books. So we can properly talk about how it fits within the dragon canon, which is what this podcast is about. So, anyway, we're reading Fourth Wing.
I don't have anything else to say. Yeah, you're right that this book is exactly the opposite from the book we just read. And again, kid, don't read Fourth Wing if you're a child. Read How to Train Your Dragon, read Joust, read Aragon, read Seraphina, or The Summer Dragon also. All of those books. Go read those instead. Oh, and Earthsea, of course.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about why we want to read it, why we picked it, because I'm maybe our children listening. So that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and hit the subscribe button or follow button.
So did you read Hatching Magic as a child? And if so, would you recommend this book to others? Please let us know in the comments or tell us what other dragon books you would like us to read.
Bye, everybody.
Bye!